Welcome to Photo Eye Conversations. Tonight, I'm excited to introduce you to photographer Cig Harvey. We're going to do a virtual walkthrough of her online exhibition, and Cig's going to tell us more about her new book, Blue Violet. If this is our first time meeting, I'm Photo Eye's gallery director, Ann Kelly. So thanks for joining us tonight, Cig.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Anne. It's always a pleasure to see you and to be a part of Photo Eye.
We're really thrilled about your new book and online exhibition. Both are just gorgeous, and I think we both have a copy.
Yes.
The book.
Yes, I have a copy. I have a copy of the second edition, though, so it's or the new printing.
Oh.
So it's a tiny bit different, but no one would ever know.
Well, we're taking orders for that second printing now.
Great.
So in honor of the book, we decided to put together an online exhibition, and we thought we'd go through that.
In the language of flowers, a posy of violets means everlasting love.
Do a lot of journaling, as I understand it. We get the privilege of viewing that world a little bit when you occasionally pull from the journaling.
You know, I think of it, Anne, as sort of writing every day as a form of paying attention, you know, in the same way, you know, I might use a camera to photograph what, oh, I saw that, you know, that red tree or this apple that was frozen or whatever it is, right? And it's sort of almost this jolt for me of what I want to remember, what I want to appreciate, what I don't understand, just something that draws me for, you know, I'm drawn to those things with a camera and to a pen, with a pen. So I will write about something that I've seen that maybe I want to remember more or think about more. And sometimes that can be just generative writing that leads to making more pictures, which is how my writing started. And other times it becomes its sort of own work in itself. And so, you know, while it might have started off in an act of early morning writing, which could be seen as a sort of a form of journaling, they often say that, you know, writing is all about falling in love with rewriting. And I have to say, I definitely think that's true. I use the pen and the camera in a similar way and for similar reasons, even though the results are really different. And some of it is also more research based. It's not journal thoughts. It's, you know, hard research from you know, botany and science and, you know, the language of flowers and history. And so I love all of that part of things. Writing, it sort of takes on many different forms, just as with the pictures. Some of them are constructed, some of them are found. Well, the writing borrows different forms to sort of act really to serve as a surprise for the viewer. So some of it I would consider poetry, other parts prose, definitely, recipes, lists, playlists, instructions. It's taking different forms of way we use words and bringing them into sort of one house in a book. So I was trying to just use different methods, different ways of how, not only how we use flowers, you know, thinking about historical context, thinking about medicinal, thinking about cultural, but also different ways that we use words and how we communicate. So those are my sort of ideas of bringing it all together under one roof.
So this particular image really speaks to me, and I'm curious to know more.
Some of the images that I made, you know, are constructed, you know, where I either saw something earlier in the day and then went back with someone to photograph, or went back in different light, or, you know, made the still life or the set. And then others are found. And I really think that's a huge part of my process, is to work in both of these ways. It's the way I've always worked. So this is a found image. And by always having a camera on me and by responding as much as I can every day, hopefully, to something that I've seen that surprised me, made me gasp, stopped me in my tracks, using the camera as sort of evidence to collect these sort of notes, you know, then the work grows, the book grows, the project grows. If I only construct pictures, it gets smaller, my world gets smaller, rather than when I also find them, the work gets bigger. And, you know, photography can tell me so much about myself, you know, and about the world that I, you know, just didn't know before the sort of camera led me there, you know. And I think paying attention to what we're making pictures of is just a really fascinating way to live. We spend so much time making pictures and less time analyzing, well, why was I drawn to that? Or why did that stop me? And it's like, if 10 of us went out with, you know, in one area, you know, each with a camera, we'll come back with 10 different sets of pictures, because we're all drawn to different things, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in that idea that we're drawn to the things that we're concerned with. The reason we're concerned with them is how we are as a kid, or how we were, as a teenager. We change less than we think. It's this idea that, we each have our projects and our stories inside of us. So this was an image that I made in Mexico City, not in Maine, Mexico City, just walking along the street. And, I saw the light reflected on that silver, sun reflector, and, the bougainvillea blossoms on the car, that amazing green car, the yellow background, just sort of this layering. I took 1 or 2 images, whereas other pictures can be so worked and so hard won by, and so it's interesting to see that, photography is one of the few mediums that really sometimes we can find our pictures, and they're a gift from the world, and also the compost heap image, that's that way too. Like someone said, well, how did you construct it? And I didn't construct it, I completely found it. It was a compost heap, I didn't make a compost heap. And I love that about photography, and it's one of the very few mediums that in the art world where that's even possible.
Well, and you blend those 2 styles of images together very seamlessly. And I would imagine, well, as you mentioned, a lot of people ask, how did you do this? They're not exactly sure, but I would imagine the act of staging images would call your attention to moments like this, maybe in a different way. You start looking at things a little bit more and how that could connect to the larger project.
I guess I always want it to be seen. Even when I have staged a photograph, I want it to seem that it wasn't. I wanted it to be believable. I think for me, pictures, when it's my work that is all staged, it feels like it's lost some of the soul or something, but that's just for me. I love some of the staged work in others, so it's finding what is right for you, that is just an important thing to listen to.
The balance of the 2 is kind of a nice dance.
Definitely, I think that it's sort of my first instinct is to sort of construct more or start with some type of idea or construction. But I really, realize that it's so important to let photography lead you, that it would reveal so much more if you get out of the way of yourself and just sort of follow the light and follow just what you're intrinsically drawn to. It will tell you so much about yourself and your work, and that's where you find your voice from. Like thinking of these 2 images sort of together, especially in book form, where the one before is probably more of a supporting image, breath on the mirror and the condensation. I think of my work as being really, the core themes, the heartbeat under the floorboard is all about the senses and what it is to feel. And that's what I'm trying to do with both the text and image, is to sort of to point, shine a light on, how it is to feel and to show that in a picture. So I love seeing like how you did this, sort of putting some images together with how, the clouds then support. So there's this sort of visual language between clouds and condensation in a mirror that starts to happen. And what happens in sequencing in a book. I always think of my projects as being book-based. Photography and books are so linked and connected. It's this beautiful marriage. It's different than an exhibition on a wall, for example, don't you think?
Definitely a different experience.
But the book, it's sort of you're remembering the images you saw before, as opposed to sort of seeing them in one eye span, particularly if it's a codex book. That I love sort of playing with that idea and how to sort of draw in references from previous pages.
And not to say that the book is a forever sequence, but we are not reorganizing the book. You might have exhibitions in different galleries.
Yeah, it's so fun to see how, oftentimes I'm not involved in the hanging of the work in a gallery. And I love to see how the gallery, how you've hung it, or how you've sequenced the work for this online exhibit. It's different than what I would have done. And that's a beautiful thing to see, so much of art making is this sort of solitary, alone experience. So to come into these sort of collaborative ways of presenting it's wonderful. So I'm always sort of looking for visiting places, sort of this Rolodex of live in Maine. I'm always trying to find spaces that have sort of this idea of that points to other sensory experiences, a sense of touch, a sense of smell, of texture, so we're not just relying on just sort of the visual of a photograph.
This particular image, I get the sense of being there, yet there's a lot of mystery within this image. It's kind of like wandering into this room and you're not sure what you're going to expect next.
But I think of that's kind of how I think of greenhouses in general, right? The sound's always weird because it's so thick with moisture, the air. And, I love a greenhouse. Like I walk into a greenhouse and I immediately want to take a nap. I mean, there's nothing I don't love about greenhouses. They're so sensory, like really fecund. And, even in winter, I love a greenhouse. There's something about this space where things grow, and there's so much potential in the air. The color, using color to talk about how something feels. It comes down to atmosphere as well in a photograph. That is it's another way of language.
For this particular project, I've had multiple people remark that they felt like they had never seen color before they saw this work.
That's the highest praise. I realize I've always been connected to color, and it's really shaped my life. I deeply believe in it, and it's a scientific fact that color affects the body and changes the body. And I think sometimes in culture, this idea that color is somehow frivolous or color is somehow decorative. Well, I disagree. I think that color, can change, can alter, and can seduce, can foster conversation, can affect us, and I think that it's something that I really am sort of leaning into more and more over the years, is sort of this ownership of really sort of my obsession with color is allowing myself to push it as much as I can. Also, this work came out of my friend Mary, who was very sick in hospital, and she was in a closed room where basically sensory experiences were being denied to her. So food came sealed and microwaved and sort of till it turned inward, and so taste was gone, right? Because it had to be, that was no fresh fruit, no fresh food at all. And then the surfaces all had to be metal, so they could be purelled and wiped down. And the only sense that was really conceded was sound, because it was medically sterile. So for me, she would say, send me pictures, and I would send her these pictures every single day, and she would send me more. And I just was, I was trying I wasn't going to send her a black and white photograph, right? I wanted her to sort of vicariously sort of feel the intense color, to be out there in the world, in a sense, through the work. So that's where it sort of became more amped up, and why I decided with Blue Violet to print full bleed, and it's a French fold, so it has this really full sort of coming off the page sort of feeling in terms of color. Or it's all very intentional, that there's no white borders anywhere. It's almost inescapable. And I think some people find the color a little claustrophobic, but that was sort of my intention, that it was sort of color that was inescapable, that was sort of demanding to be looked at. The new work that I'm working on now is I'm sort of going even further. And so as much as I delved into, the language of flowers in every different sort of aspect, I'm also now really digging deep into sort of color and history around color. And it's been an obsession of mine for years. And now sort of really putting it under one umbrella it's exciting. I mean, we're always trying to sort of be in love with our work and get excited to wake up in the morning to set the alarm for 3 a.m. to get up and go and see what that color looks like at night. I think I'm just so grateful to photography, this idea that after all these years of I started working in a darkroom at 13, to be like making work still, and so excited to see what it looks like as a photograph.
So I'm curious about this particular image.
What I love about this image is I often use some sort of scrim or something in between the view, so the viewer has to sort of work a little bit to get beyond what is just straight there. Sometimes, not always, but that's something that, so I'm photographing through an old window pane. My job is to work intuitively, and then after the fact to sit and say, well, why did I do that? What do I like about this picture? And what I like about it is that the eyes are sort of covered and obliterated by so vision. We think of the senses, particularly as photographers, as vision meaning everything, but all of the senses bring information to our brain. 75% of the information in the brain comes from vision, but the other 25%. So playing with that idea of sort of taking away the vision with these petals. I loved the shadow that I didn't see at the time. I don't remember on her from the petals on her shoulder, the skin tone, the the mouth, the nose, the ear being shown, but the eyes taken away. And then just also this sort of immersion into this world of flowering azalea. That's what I was drawn to.
Now it really feels kind of between two worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Of just sort of this other plane. It's not the way our eyes necessarily see, right? So I'm always trying to find ways using the camera that's perhaps different than the way we see necessarily, or slows it down, you know, what our eyes would try and sort of make up. And I sort of love that idea and how photography can demand that. Because it's like taking the everyday, but somehow seeing it in a new way, or seeing it in a way that feels somehow rare. You know, I mean, I love Photoshop work, but I try and make everything in camera and, you know, use the digital darkroom very much like I would the wet darkroom. You know, back in the day, I taught printing, color printing, and black and white. But I really try and sort of find it in camera. I sort of consider that my job to do. Just find it in the world rather than make it.
And it kind of makes every day kind of a journeying out to, you don't know what sort of magic you're going to come across.
Exactly. And I think, and it's sort of what I love about photography is that it gives this gift of like, it demands that you pay attention. And living a life as a photographer is like demanding that you pay attention to everything around you. And I think that's a really beautiful way to live, you know, because I think it makes you a more compassionate person. I think it makes you maybe kinder. I think it makes you just more observant instead of sort of going through the world without looking and seeing. I mean, you know, there are some terrible things that are, you know, constantly happening in the world, but there are also some beautiful things that are constantly happening in the world. And, you know, and nature is an example of that. I mean, I definitely see nature as a way to repair, as a way to foster conversation. And I think that's what art also does, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's sort of a proven fact that forest bathing and walking in the woods is good for the soul. And I also feel that sort of making work and art can have that purpose too. So this is a picture that was found. So this is a hybrid picture. So the ladder was up against the house, but I drove by this rhododendron a number of times. Like, you know, I mean, that's the beautiful thing about nature, right? And the flowering season, you can't wait too long. The weather's going to change. It will be gone tomorrow, or it'll be past or whatever. And I sort of love that, how that haunts me. Right now, I'm obsessed with goldenrod, you know, it's this bright yellow weed that grows in the fields here. And if I don't go out tonight, you know, it's over. I have to wait a whole another year until it happens again. And, you know, and it's like, and I sort of love that. It keeps me on my toes. It keeps me sweating. It keeps me like, I gotta feverish about sort of making work. And I think that's a sort of beautiful way to live, that notice the world, appreciate the world, and make photographs as sort of evidence that I lived, that I saw this. And so this rhododendron, I couldn't believe it, as it's sort of this crazy pink. And I photographed the ladder beside it, and it's on a main road, and people trespassing and all the things, you know. But I knew I had to put the ladder up against the rhododendron bush, that was the picture. And it was completely intuitive. I mean, I wasn't doing my mind map at that point of figuring out, you know, what's that going to say. I just, you know, worked in this intuitive way, and then put the ladder back. But I sort of love metaphorically what it's talking about. I like this picture a lot. And
you have cars driving by.
Totally. And the ladder was really heavy. The ladder was crazy heavy. But you know, it's almost like a mom protecting her kid or whatever. Like when you want a picture, you'll do it. I love that idea of just this ladder resting up against these like ridiculous blooms. Yeah,
I love that story behind that.
Yeah, and then this one is a found image of just walking at night, and I saw it and the light, and I took 1 or 2 frames, you know. So, but again, it's the color that drew me here, the color that sort of made me gasp. And I think that's what I'm trying to do, is sort of is document the things that surprise me in life, and surprise me and delight me, and might also do that for someone else. My friend Polly, at high tide, I was up on a building, and, you know, initially I had gone there planning to photograph her leaping off this building into the water. And, you know, we did that, and it worked, but it wasn't quite right, and this, that, and the other. And then this act of seeing the way that red, I mean, this picture was all about color, right? The way that red interacted when the tide started sort of coming into this one area and sort of taking over, and that red against the dark, and how suddenly something that was, you know, quite normal in many ways turned into something that sort of that became other, you know, this idea, it almost felt like blood, or it felt like this sort of stain moving out the dress. And then just, you know, this gesture that she did that I didn't direct her, but it seemed to that moment where it was pointing to something outside of itself, and it sort of get at something that is of this world, but feels somehow rare or special, or like it's pointing to something that is unknowable, primordial. I write a lot in Blue Violet about full moon and the tides and flowering plant life, and how roses bloom more during full moon, and you know, you can't pick an orchid during full moon, how we're all connected, this idea of you know, we are part of nature as opposed to separate of nature. I think that that's something I'm really interested in too.
It's all scientific, but it exists within this other realm or something.
Well, that's the thing. And that's what, you know, so much of my research is done. I'm sort of drawn to a fact, and I'm drawn to a fact. And then I realize that fact, which in itself, factual things, it seems like it would be, it's got this idea that it could be boring. Whereas, you know, the reality is it couldn't be further from the truth, that it's this sort of, the natural world full of fact is actually like astonishing, that you know, that you can't, and it's free often, you know, it's there, it's like, it's nature as this sort of abundance and nature that of you know, it, that we can learn from and that we can be a part of, and that is free to access, that the sky, the blue sky, to stand under, you know, a cobalt blue sky in February in Maine is just an extraordinary feeling. It's not about a purchased experience.
And you do a really beautiful job of experiencing those moments and tuning into them, and then sharing them in the form of your photographs and writing.
Thank you, Anne. I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think that is what, you know, that idea of the core of the work being about what it is to feel. And then, so if I can feel it, then it's sort of the picture or the words, that's what I'm after for them to do, right? So it's passed on, that idea of, and I think, you know, that is the gift of creativity, you know, that keeps giving. That's the gift of art in many ways.
So I love the transition from the fireworks to these flowers that feel like fireworks to me. Anyway.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite pages in the book too. I really, that sequencing again, you know, I think the firework image before is sort of, would it stand on its own? I don't know, but together they sort of come and add up to more than the sum of their parts, when it's referencing, you know, one, and how we start seeing these similarities between things, between the objects, and how the macro and the micro sort of come together. So I think that's sort of a real joy that I find in sequencing and working in the book form, that it allows me to sort of to play, to see how to sequence, not just in terms of color and tone, but, you know, obviously shape and form, and what, you know, how you can make associations by when you put photographs together.
Yeah, it creates this really interesting dialogue. That one's really haunting as well.
And there's nothing like sunlight on ferns, and new ferns particularly. There's only a very like short period of time early on in the season where they're this color that is sort of an indescribable green, but that's my job. I can't just say it's indescribable green. Like, I've got to work on what is that green? What should I call it? You know, that's something that will keep me up tonight, you know, and I'll get up at 4 a.m. and start writing about that green. And then, you know, the green near the red again, the red of the lips. So, you know, there's this short window of time where these pictures can be made. And that part is really an important aspect of it, because it's about this sort of seasonality. It's about our time and on this planet, you know, about not taking things for granted, about living in the present, about being present and being aware. So that was what I was drawn to the ferns first, and then went with my friend Olivia and made these pictures.
Beautiful.
This is Scout. She was 8 years old, but she looks about 35 in this picture. What I love is the sort of the wind in her hair, and the, you know, and how that hair is sort of mimicked by her dress, which obviously I didn't intend. It just sort of a beautiful gift that photography gives you sometimes, but just that feeling of being free, that's how it felt to, you know, me. And that's what I sort of, when I looked at the film and saw that, you know, this was the one that had that feeling of just being, you know, just being alive, being, you know, the wind on your face, just, you know, that sensory experience. Blue Violet is a book where flowers and botanicals are used, but it's not about flowers, you know. And I think that sometimes with photography, we're sort of, you know, are you a mummy photographer, or are you a landscape photographer, and you know, or you know, flowers. It's not, they aren't all flowers. They are, I mean, they are, the pictures are all flowers, but they're not about flowers. They're about, you know, what it is to live and die, sensory experience. That is what it is to be human. I'm using flowers and botanicals and the natural world as a metaphor for feeling, you know.
I'm not going to ask if this was found and staged, because I like the mystery.
Good.
I don't want to know.
Good, because, you know, they would surprise you. Some of the ones that people think are absolutely staged, they're not, you know. And I sort of love that that in between of not knowing.
I do as well. Sometimes there's that you want to know, but sometimes it's more fun not ask.
Yeah. Because the thing is, it doesn't matter, you know. It doesn't matter whether it was or it wasn't, you know. I mean, we've all, if you've ever planted a garden, which is this beautiful, positive, hopeful act, right? An act of rebellion, I like to call it, you know, making more beauty, not less in the world. We've all filled our cars full of flowers. And it's an extraordinary thing to drive with a bunch of flowers in your car, and they're all, it's like a bunch of kids, you know, they're all like nodding their heads. And so a friend said to me, sent me a picture yesterday, he had bought this massive fern, and he said it was like having a Muppet in the car with him, you know, as he was driving along. And I was like, oh, what a great reference, I love that, you know. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing, these are all ordinary experiences. There's nothing extraordinary in any of these pictures, you know, but it's like trying to find the right light, the right color, the right atmosphere to tell them in.
Tell the story.
Yeah.
Our new gallery assistant is really drawn to this one and wanted me to ask you about it.
So why I love this one is that I love angel trumpets anyway, this flower, because they have this sort of nefarious like history to them. And I love all this stuff, right? So it's not just about making pictures, it's about the research. It's about finding out, you know, the history of these plants and how they've been used in different cultures through ages. Angel trumpets are, you know, they have they're medicinally very strong. They can cause hallucinations. They can cause, you know, they can cause death if you ingest too many. But a little bit, apparently, I've never done this, don't recommend it, but a little bit can be sort of a sparkly thing. So then it's sort of, you know, and they grow quite freely in Mexico. So then I was thinking about Frida Kahlo, who I love, and how, you know, she has these in her gardens, and how maybe she would tap, and I write about this, you know. So it's this idea of taking some piece of fact, like they grow in Mexico, they are hallucinogenic, they do get rid of pain. So those are all facts, right? But then, you know, taking this idea of Frida Kahlo, and maybe she used them to tap a little bit in her nightly sangria, which I don't know if she ever did that, but that's sort of part of my artistic process, to sort of write and to talk about that, you know. And this was an image I made at the sort of very last light. I'd been with my friend Emily, and we had photographed, you know, in a couple of different places, and we were just driving home. We saw the light on this very small river, and I was like, can you do it? She was like, I'll do it. And we, like, you know, we just got in, and she went down there, and, you know, and the reality is it was kind of like mosquito-y and not as it, but, you know, I love that photography makes me do that. Like, it makes me get up really early in the morning, or it puts me in this situation where, you know, I'm there, and it's gorgeous, you know, that this ripple effect that, you know, of Emily standing there in the water, and, you know, we talk about it, and she's like, I never regret coming. And I was like, it's like, you never regret going out with your camera. It always gives you something, even if it's not what you expected. So that idea of, you know, using the camera as a way to sort of live more, to like puts you standing in a river at dusk, and appreciating the world more. I think that that's what I love about photography, that these sort of impromptu surprises that happen because you're out there with your camera looking for something interesting, looking for light, looking for a gesture. If you don't go out and you just sit watching TV, you're not going to find it. So I'm so grateful to photography for that reason of just sort of demanding that I go out and have these experiences.
And it's fantastic that you have friends that are willing to jump out of the car into the river.
I know, what can I say? I'm convincing. But I also think, I think it's a magical experience for them too. Like Emily, I've photographed, the people that I photograph, I tend to, in fact, I can't think of one example where this isn't true. I haven't photographed them numerous times. Like Devon, I've photographed for 15, 20 years. She now works at the workshops, and people say, you Devon? And Emily, I've photographed for probably 5 or 6 years. She says to me that it makes her, she'd never not come because she'd never not miss the opportunity to see the world a little bit differently, or to be, rather than watch television, and I think that's true. We always have an adventure and end up making something that feels beautiful. And that is a way to live that I think is important.
I absolutely agree.
That last picture with the horse. I mean, I had collected that off the side of the road, and then it was made over years, and then it rusted at the side behind the barn. And my husband Doug was like, oh my God, I'm going to take it to the dump. And I was like, no, I'm going to make a picture with it. And he was like, when, and then I spray painted it white and put it down by the river. This is at the bottom of our property. So it didn't work unless I spray painted it white. I mean, intuitively, I just spray painted it. I wasn't sort of overthinking it. And then it's still down there now, haunting my neighbor. And that's 2 years ago. And then I photographed it again this year. So it's sort of some props live on, well, all the props live on, but some continue to get made pictures, but I loved the way this felt against the green, against that, again, sunlight on ferns. I mean, it's like nothing else.
Well, if I see that horse reappear again, I will be excited about it.
I can send you some pictures tomorrow. It absolutely does. Yeah,
that would be great. So this one is also quite mysterious.
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I make is made in Maine, right? It's I try and make work where I live. I think that's an important aspect to me, to my sort of philosophy as an artist. But sometimes, it's March, April, May. In Maine, nothing is happening. There's only so many snow pictures that I can make. And so, I actually made this in Iceland. And it's a found photograph, and there's just something that was unknowable about this blue hole, and that's why I love it. That it was beyond what we know as humans. I mean, yes, scientific fact. I know that the temperature of this was 416, so it's boiling hot. I know it's near, a geyser, and so there's facts that I know about it, but it also is unknowable to me, and that's what I love.
There's a blue hole in New Mexico that's not particularly warm, but it's deep enough that people scuba dive in it.
Oh, wow.
And it can be this really, even if you are aware of the facts behind it, that it's X number of feet deep and that people do scuba dive in it, the experience of being there when large numbers of scuba divers are coming out at the same time is pretty exceptional, because it's not, the diameter isn't very wide.
Yeah.
So it's this, how is this even possible moment?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And, so again, we're talking about experiences, right? Sensory experiences, what it is to be living. Using the camera to sort of augment that is something that I'm really drawn to.
So here's another one that's, it almost has that look of the fireworks, but it's not fireworks.
Right.
The title Spice. So I assume this is another one that makes the mind wander.
Yeah, this is, I mean, and I loved seeing what I liked about this picture when I was sort of looking at it after the fact. I loved seeing the hand on the bottom coming out of the rock edge. I made this at a quarry. I mean, I find quarries really fascinating. Again, there's sort of something, unknowable. It feels, how deep quarries are that have, been filled with water, how just, there's something sort of terrifying, but also extremely beautiful about them. And then that is sort of also this the idea of that heaven and hell, beauty and pain, and that duality, I think, is really interesting in photograph. And then again, with the colors, the opposites that are happening, and this sort of explosion, it's I don't really understand this picture either, but that's what I like about it. And this is the compost heap, which I was haunted by, and I went back and I photographed it. I'm still photographing it, this is from 2019, but I went back and I photographed it every day for probably 2 months or 6 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. And the day it snowed and it was finally over, I was like, oh, and the colors, it turned into a different season, radically. They went from summer to fall to winter, and then it was over. And it was almost a sense of relief, because it was haunting me. I couldn't sleep at night. I'd be lying in bed going, is it too early? Can I show up there and start photographing? I'd photograph it in the rain, in the snow. I made videos. I made time lapse, stop motion. I mean, I was obsessed about this compost. But I think that's kind of how we have to be as artists. Like, we find the things that intrigue us and we go with it. This is something that I'm still working with, for years now, the same site. I think it's that sort of that duality of something so beautiful that's decaying, that's so temporal, that it, time, all these notions. I mean, photography, as photographers, we are dealing, our currency is time. And I think that, that is screaming out in this picture. I mean, there's so many different reasons why I love this space, but I think that's one of them. Like I was talking about the goldenrod, when it goes, it's sad that it goes because it marks another year, right? And I think that's what I'm desperately trying to do, is just sort of record time of just, there's this wonderful page in H is for Hawk, a book, I think it's nonfiction, but it reads as fiction, and it's a beautiful novel anyway. And she was talking about her father being a photographer, and purely as a way to sort of say, I was alive, I saw this, I made this mark on the world. And I think that's also what I'm doing. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing as photographers.
In unique ways. So that is the online exhibition, and we're taking pre-orders for the second printing. First printing sold very quickly. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very honored. Yeah. So we're doing a second printing just because the first printing sold out so quickly. I didn't want it to be that sort of, it's like, crazy prices on the secondhand market. I want people to have this book. So we're going to do a second printing, but it's not massive, smaller run than the first. Very proud of the book and very grateful for all the support it's received. So I just want to thank you for the show and for, obviously supporting the book too. And
we're honored to have it. It is beautiful. And I'm looking forward to the second printing.
Oh, well, that's so nice of you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for doing this. This was great.
No, it was great to catch up with you. And before I let you go, do you have any advice for other people who are seeking to publish books? You've published a few over the years. Just any tidbits?
Well, Blue Violet is my fourth book. And I would say, for me, I teach bookbinding. And I think it's so important to, even if you never make them after, I think to take a class and actually and consider every element of the book form. So from the page size, and designing the book around the form of the book, around the content of the images or the content of the story. So the size of the page, the type of paper, the color of the type, the size of the type, all these things that affect the way the overall story. With Blue Violet, we did this, French fold, which means it's a closed edge out. A couple of people have written, said, I love the book. I'm not complaining, but just, my pages are not cut. So, and there's a, and I was like, no, it's supposed to be that way. But, because it changes the weight and that becomes about touch, right? And so thinking about all these elements of how the choices you make, and you have to decide whether you have a blue cover, a red cover, or shiny paper or matte. You've got to make these choices anyway, so let them be considered. So I think for me, the biggest, the shift happened when I started really realizing that all of those design choices affected the content and then the narrative of the book. So I mean, I think that I don't know a single photographer who doesn't want a book. I know for me it was desperately important, because it is the perfect stage for photography. You know, the two go together so beautifully. So I think that starting with a maquette, less blurb and things like that, but really like physical pictures and paper and, you know, bulldog clipping them together so that you get the sense of how it feels. You know, and then working with a book designer was also, I think, really important. Deb Wood, who designed my first 3 books, was wonderful and really took the same content, which in a blurb book just sort of felt like a bit of a third, to this new place. And then I worked with Jeanette Abink on Blue Violet, and you know, I could never have imagined what she would have done, and this sort of the selecting of certain, you know, colors and to offset to show the type. To, I mean, it really, you know, just this beautiful, and the way everything is mirrored against the sort of these pink end covers, and so the color becomes, you know, it becomes important. So all of those things, those considerations of the book form, I think are really important, to that they suit the pictures that they suit your pictures. So, you know, let the pictures lead what the book looks like. So,
well, that's great advice, and we definitely see it in your book, which is, it really is a beautiful art object.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Anne.
Absolutely.
So do I.
Thanks, Cig. Thanks for joining us and sharing a little more. And I hope to see you in the real world sooner.
I know, in real life, maybe APAD in April. Yes. Who knows? Fingers crossed, right?
Fingers crossed. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Bye. Take care.
I hope you've enjoyed tonight's conversation with Cig Harvey. If you'd like to go back and spend a little more time with the online exhibition, you can find it on the homepage of PhotoEye's website. That's photoeye.com, or you can find it at blueviolet.photoeye.com. If you have any questions about the prints or the book, please reach out to me. You can email me at gallery@photoeye.com. Thanks for watching and have a great night.